So this is just kind of an overview of homeschooling. And I'll give you sort of a snapshot of what homeschooling looks like. And this is for national homeschooling, so you sort of know where we're starting from. Homeschooling is legal in all 50 states. Nationwide, homeschoolers make up about 40% of school-age children, and that actually is growing as more people look to, well, these for a number of reasons. Homeschoolers are very diverse ethnically, politically, and socioeconomically, which is definitely a change from maybe 20 or 30 years ago when everyone thought homeschoolers were sheltered, they were just very fundamentalist. That is definitely not the case now. At least 28 states and counting have laws allowing homeschoolers to participate in interscholastic sports. And a lot of that can be through PSPs, which I'll get through, or even the school district. So nationally, homeschool growth is about 15% a year. It was 10%, but in the last 5 years, it's grown 15%. And the laws vary state by state. And I will go over the laws in California so that you can figure out how to homeschool legally. Okay, so again, we have California. We lead the nation in homeschoolers. We're about 12% of all homeschoolers across the nation. And you know, if you've looked at the rate of growth, I mean, it keeps growing exponentially for a lot of reasons. Okay, so greetings from California. First thing to remember, school is not compulsory until age 6. That means if your child doesn't not necessarily have to go to TK, doesn't have to go to kindergarten. It's up to you whether or not you want to start school at age 6. That is the law. In 2018, California had nearly, 200,000 homeschoolers. It was up. And we have about 12% of homeschoolers nationwide. We're a very big state for homeschooling. And it looks differently for everyone in the state, as diverse as we are. Many public homeschool charters, and I'll get into what a public homeschool charter is, offer TK. Some even offer extended TK. Extended TK means that maybe they didn't hit the traditional TK cutoff, but they do allow a few months of extended TK. So that is considered homeschooling as well. Homeschooling in California has grown double the rate of the national average since 2015. I wonder what happened in 2015 to see that growth. But again, nationally, the rate is about 15%. We hit about 30%. I know that one of the biggest charters here in California, Southern California in particular, this summer just added 10,000 new students alone. So people are flocking to homeschooling. That's thanks in part to charter homeschooling, and I'll get to the difference between filing a PSA, a PSP, and charter homeschooling. So charter homeschooling and independent study programs, we refer to them as ISPs, are the most popular methods for homeschooling. Now, what I want to tell you about these numbers, they're not exact numbers. This is coming through the California Department of Ed. And the reason why it's a little bit hard to track homeschoolers is because we don't know necessarily, we can't differentiate between charters. So we have charter students in charter schools, but we don't differentiate between the brick and mortar and the ISPs. So it seems as though there are more students in ISP programs than brick and mortar programs because it is becoming so popular. And then I have some little quotes here. So, okay, so diversity in education and demographics. I just kind of wanted to explore the changing tide of homeschooling because I wanted to get away from the notion that homeschoolers are just very homogenous. They believe one thing. That's simply not true. Okay, so in California in particular, the ranks of students of color, Black and Latinx homeschoolers have grown dramatically for a lot of different reasons. Also, you know, we also look at students in a lot of socioeconomic groups as well. Parents of special needs in particular, you probably wouldn't think that they would gravitate towards homeschooling, but they actually do because they are able to develop a custom program and work around therapies for their student. Instead of their students with IEPs being pulled out of class and maybe feeling a little stigmatized, it might be better for them to actually do their therapies just in their normal life, so they don't have that stigma. I homeschool because I know that my daughter would have both a 504 and an IEP, and she's thriving. She's thriving the way she is right now with our homeschool journey. So there are tons of online resources that empower students and parents, and I'll get into some of those as well. They cite a lot of different reasons that usually bullying, racism, and peer pressure are at the top. It's not necessarily because of religious views. And then also people just want something different with their lives. They want to go on the road with road schooling. I have a student who is a family that is in an RV, and they're traveling around the United States, and they're learning history by living history. World schooling is also a possibility. Some people just sell everything and go on the road and tour the world for a couple years. There's game schooling, where kids get together, play games, and then even theme park schooling. I had to put that in there because you would be surprised at how many education programs there are. And we're so lucky in Orange County to have Disneyland. Disneyland has something called Disney Youth and Education. And with that, you have access to actual Disney Imagineers, and you can learn about, say, wave refraction with water through Pirates of the Caribbean, or you can learn about history through that program, animation, art, performing arts. So those are a lot of great programs. And as you can see, again, this reflects that homeschooling is changing. So I like to always talk about the benefits of homeschooling. It was Aristotle that said that, what is an education? You need to educate the heart as well as the mind. So that's why one of the reasons why we homeschool, my husband and I. For us, it becomes a lifestyle. I want my children to learn how to be lifelong learners, and to know that learning does not necessarily take place in four walls. It doesn't take place when a bell rings. And it doesn't take place between the hours of 8:45 and 2:45. It also allows us to meet students where they are. Both my children are very different. My 4-year-old is already teaching himself to read. He knows a lot of his times tables, and my 8-year-old, she's taking a little bit of a slower route, but her art and her storytelling skills are very advanced, and as well as her language. So I'm very proud of her being someone who had a pretty severe speech delay when she was younger. So we can also tailor the learning to the individual child, and look at their learning style, what resonates with them, what excites them, what ignites passion in them. And of course, the world is our classroom, and we're able to pursue interests and passions, and it takes the pressure out of learning. One thing that I really enjoy, and I've tried different curriculum. If a curriculum isn't working, I can just kind of pivot and try something new. For example, my daughter was doing a storytelling Charlotte Mason based math program, and I loved it. I thought it was very beautiful, very rich in storytelling. And she usually loves storytelling, but she hated it. I switched to Singapore math. It was just pretty much straight math, and she loved it, and she flourished in it. So that was a learning experience for me as well. Now imagine if she were in a situation where you can't just necessarily change the curriculum that you're working on. So that's one of the benefits as well. Again, meeting the child where we are. So complements a variety of learning styles, and maybe I can do another talk a little bit later about what those learning styles are. But I know that some people are already coming from a brick and mortar charter background, or maybe their kids are thriving in public school or private school. And so you can do that. You can mirror that at home, or you can do something completely different. I started off doing something very play-based, Waldorfy, and then I sort of morphed into a Charlotte Mason classical mashup with some unschooly, field trip learning through field trips. And what does that mean? That just means that we read a lot of literature, we appreciate really beautiful art, and do beauty loops with music and art and nature. And then with the classical, we also visit some of the trivium too. We honor the grammar stage, the rhetoric stage, and then the logic stage. So, and that's, the trivium has been around since the Middle Ages. And we use this as a framework to meet our kids where they are, and it works for us. So, all right. So on to the legal ways to homeschool in California. I should kind of preface this by saying, yes, I mentioned that I switched careers and I became a homeschool teacher for a public charter, but this is not about charter necessarily. This is about the legal ways to homeschool. And one thing that we're very fortunate about in California is that we have 3 legal ways to homeschool. And we're pretty free compared to a lot of other states. So the first way is PSA. That is filing a private school affidavit. And I will talk a little bit more in depth with each of these 3 ways. Another way is to sign up with a private school satellite program, a PSP. And then, of course, the most popular way, the way that a lot of people homeschool in California, public homeschool charter. And so let's talk about PSAs first. So when you file a PSA, you go to the California Department of Ed and you file a private school affidavit. What does that mean? It means you are filing as a private school. The filing the filing period is within October 1st through October 15th. However, it remains open the rest of the year. So what does this mean? This means that if you're having a really hard time at the school that you're at, you can file a PSA whenever you want. That is your right to do that. You can file a homeschool PSA. These are some things to consider when considering the PSA. Number 1, it's the least restrictive. A lot of people love that freedom. You are not required to take tests. You write your own transcripts. Your education is 100% customizable. Now, you are responsible for all the costs. You are responsible for keeping all the records, and I'll give you a list of records that you need to keep in the next slide. And again, you can do it however you want. If you want to hire private tutors, you can do that. If you want to homeschool and teach your child yourself, you can do that as well. If you want to do co-ops, you can do that. You can go to enrichment, you can go to classes. The sky's the limit. So the main thing with PSA to consider, again, least restrictive, yay. But some people don't like that. Some people want the accountability, and that's fine. There are other ways to homeschool where you have more accountability, but you are required to keep the records and you're responsible for all the costs. Okay, so what does it look like? When you go onto the website, this is how you file the private school affidavit, and it will kind of walk you through that whole process. So, all right. So some other PSA facts. These are some records that you need to keep for the PSA. You have to have a copy of the PSA on file all the time in case you get audited. People are very rarely audited for PSAs. You keep a faculty record. Okay, that sounds kind of silly, probably. So what does that mean? Okay, so you're the teacher, your husband or your partner is the principal, or vice versa. You can, say that your husband's a janitor. You just have a faculty record. So, it can be one person, it can be 2 people. It doesn't matter. It can be more. You can have a team in your house. You have to keep your own attendance records, and you can do that on spreadsheet. You can do that in paper pencil. You can sort of even keep a diary if you want. And then you have an outline of your students' curriculum. That looks a lot of different ways. You can Google different ways on how to do that. Most people like to go to like Lakeshore or, see some printables online for the teacher curriculum book. And that's fine too. I keep my curriculum choices because I kind of customize it and riff on it. I keep it on a spreadsheet, and I can share that with you guys later if you want. Okay, so next step is PSP. PSP is also a private school. setting up a private school. Actually, you are joining a private school. You're joining a private school satellite program, PSP. What does this mean? It means that it's considered an administrative umbrella for homeschoolers. It is a private school, so you're joining a larger private school. Instead of setting up your own private school with 1 to 6 students, or however many children you have, you're signing up with a larger private school. The cost is about a few $100s to a few $1,000s a year. And there are so many different types of PSPs. There are faith-based PSPs, there are secular, there are PSPs that provide curriculum for you. There are PSPs where all they do is host, testing if you want to do testing, because some people want to do testing, or events, park days, play dates, whatever it may be. Things to consider. They keep the records for you. For some people, that is definitely a draw. If you are unorganized and you hate record keeping, or you're just worried about whatever, getting audited or something, then you have someone else keeping the records for you. So some PSPs provide curriculum support. You can choose their curriculum, or they might give you and mentor you on which curriculum to use depending on what you tell them. And so again, you choose all your curricula, activities, enrichment, and tutors. One thing for the state of California, the PSP must maintain an office in California. What, honey? Sorry, Daddy lots of boosters, but I found one. Okay. In Audrey's room. My 4-year-old. We could use it. Okay. Go. But they have steps, but I could put my one on it and the other. I'm in a meeting right now, buddy. Okay. Okay. So my 4-year-old came in here. Okay, so with the PSP, you must maintain an office in California, and they file the PSA for you. So California wants them to have a physical office in order for them to be legitimate. And again, education is 100% customizable. So the difference between PSA, you're kind of on your own. Some people like that. PSP, some people like having the administrative umbrella. So next, okay. So the next is charter homeschooling. So this is public charter homeschooling. And this is probably one of the most popular ways to homeschool in California. And so what does this mean? For a lot of people that are reluctant to homeschool, it might be a good bridge between, say, traditional school and homeschooling. And it can be an intermediary. Some people love charter homeschooling, and that's all they've ever done. And we kind of fall into that. So we are technically considered a public school, and so your child is attending a public school. You must register with a homeschool charter. They keep the records and record attendance. How does that work? That usually means that you upload records. It's usually some sort of form of residency, your child's birth certificate, and then any other forms that they request per the state of California, because they are a public school. Students are assigned credentialed teachers to lend support and oversee state standards. And that can be very helpful, especially when you're first starting out. Usually a lot of HSTs are veteran homeschoolers, or they're homeschooling their children themselves also.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, hi. I'm listening.
Okay. So hold on. Okay. So then you also have students have access to education funds provided by the state to help customize their education. And that is also very much a draw. It depends on the charter. Every charter is different, so do your research, but usually charters give between, I would say, $2,400 to like $3,000 or $3,200 a year, depending on what they offer and what services they offer. So it's completely different. They also have different requirements as well. So charter homeschooling provides an opportunity for every child in California. And why is this important? Because We have students that are getting kicked out of schools. And so through public charter homeschooling, this is one way that they can access a free and public education through homeschooling. So it also eliminates a barrier to entry for some students who may have a harder time entering into homeschooling because of the cost. But you can homeschool with $0. You know, a lot of also public charters offer IEP support, which is really important for some parents with students with special needs. So things to consider. Nothing is without a catch. Students are obviously highly encouraged to participate in state testing, and they have the CASP testing and then also the presidential fitness testing. Usually charters at the beginning of the year will ask students to take something like iReady or Star 360, which is just a baseline, and it sort of shows where they are academically. Now, keep in mind, it's in no way the only measure of intelligence, grit, ability. Some kids just are terrible test takers. Some kids hate sitting through a test. I hate sitting through a test. So I would probably be a really horrible test taker, but luckily, you know, you can demonstrate through soft skills too. Again, each charter's different. Education is customizable. You are required by law to meet with a credentialed teacher every 20 days or less, and that works out to about every month, and that is the teacher of record. And that teacher is required to collect academic samples each month. Every charter is different in this aspect as well. Some charters are just online ISPs, so they will collect the samples for you online. Some require one sample per learning period. It's usually a learning period. And some require one or two per subject per learning period. One thing that is very important to remember is educational funds may not be used or spent on religious or faith-based material. That means services and curriculum as well. So you can do that on your own dime, but the charter per the state of California will not support anything religious based. Okay, a little bit more about public charter homeschooling. So how does the process work? The process works, I mentioned the Star 360 or the iReady, that's just the baseline testing. A lot of parents like that, especially if they're coming from public school, to kind of see where their children are at. So I see some questions. Are there lotteries for charters? Not usually, not for ISPs. ISPs don't usually have lottery admissions. They may have, say, wait lists if they have an influx of students. And then so would you have to be a credentialed teacher to be able to teach if you are using a public charter? No. If you're a parent and you do not have a teaching credential, you have your teaching credential, your teacher of record. So whoever your HST, you know, homeschool teacher or education coach, education specialist, ES, whatever, then they are your teacher of record and they can help guide you and partner with you on this journey. So, oh no, that's cool, Nakomi. Awesome. Okay, so did you get back the sample work that you submit to the charter? So here's the thing. You can either submit the samples to your HST physically, and then they usually scan it and they upload it. Everything in California is digital. Even the testing, when you go in for state testing, the CASP testing, it's digital as well. The only thing that's not going to be digital is, of course, the presidential fitness test, because you actually have to do something physical for it. But you can usually, you can email, scan, take pictures, and send it to your HST, your ES, or your EC. And then, you know, each charter has its own way of recording the academic samples. So for example, you know, Inspire. Inspire, if you are in TK through 8th, then you turn in a sample of either the course, one of the core subjects, math, social studies, language arts, or science. What does that mean? Okay, so for math, easy enough, maybe some worksheets. Social studies, maybe you gave a presentation at your one of your enrichment and you want to take a picture, you would have the child maybe, you know, write in his or her own words a couple paragraphs of what that was about. Science, you know, whatever it may be, pictures of field trips, and then writing about it. So anything enriching, anything academic. You want to put your student's best foot forward for whatever that was for the month. And if you want to keep those samples, great. Just take a picture or scan it. So one really good thing about having a charter is when you work with an HST, an EC, or an I always get the acronyms wrong. You know, well, let's just call them HSTs, homeschool teacher, because that is, you're working with a credentialed teacher. Again, public charter homeschooling, public schools have teachers, public school teachers have to be credentialed. So every HST is going to have a credential. You get individualized unlimited credential teacher help usually. And the main thing is probably to find a really good HST that understands you and gets you. For example, we have HSTs that are really good at working with Waldorfy families. And if, for those of you familiar with the Waldorf philosophy, it may not look as academic, although it is academic, but it may not be as, say, academic, like sitting down, writing papers or things like that. You usually do main lessons and a lot of art and a lot of crossing the meridian while you're learning. It's also very developmental. Charlotte Mason do a lot of copy work. That's fine too. And then some families, they like to do things online. They like to mimic what they are coming from the public school, and that's fine, or a private school. So an HST can be invaluable in helping you figure out curriculum, style, giving encouragement, helping you find enrichment opportunities through vendors, and I can talk a little bit more about vendors in a bit, and access unique resources. Like I said, every charter is different. Some charters have actual enrichment centers where they hold classes maybe 1 or 2 days a week. Some have lending libraries. Some also, for example, have offices where you can come in and meet your teachers. Some have free curriculum. It may be proprietary just for that charter. So, that's where you really shop around and find a really good fit. Let's see. Again, you have access to a variety of curricula. That is, it can be out of the box. When I say out of the box, it's usually very scripted. And scripted can mean that it takes the guesswork out of it. So you don't have to figure out what you're doing. It just tells you, read this to the student, give the student this, do it in this way. It may be a little bit more open-ended as well. It may just be online, where a student, especially an older student, may be have a little bit more autonomy and a stake in his or her own learning. So I mentioned academic samples and then state testing. One thing about charters to remember is that, yes, you can opt out. However, it makes the charter look bad. And charters are reauthorized usually every 3 to 5 years, usually 5 years. And we want to make sure that we protect our charters because they serve our students, and they're in the industry of serving students. A lot of these ISPs and homeschool charters are the only way to access a free and public education under, say, SB 277 or 276, 714. I'm just rattling off all these bills, just these endless bills that keep coming. So, okay, so let's move along. Okay. Again, I don't know where that came from. Did I do that? Okay. So one size does not fit all. What does this mean? It means the possibilities are endless when it comes to homeschooling. It means that you will probably feel overwhelmed, but that's a good thing because there are so many options, especially in Orange County here, Southern California as a whole. Field trips are invaluable. I can't tell you how many times I've been on a field trip, and say to the aquarium or one of the science centers with my kids, and thinking, okay, well, we're going to be here for about an hour, and then say a marine scientist comes out and starts talking to the kids and spends 3 hours with them. So yes, I will talk about a little bit about those bills in a moment. But um, also, so one thing I love is that experts love homeschoolers because homeschoolers are usually very engaged. They're there on a field trip, so they're very engaged and interested in what's going on. There are drop-off enrichment programs, yes. Usually charters will only pay for 2 or 3 days at a time. Some will only pay for 2 days. Some will pay for 3 days. Some will pay for a little bit more, but then you're kind of getting into a gray area, and we want to protect our charters. We also have learning labs as well for vendors. You can choose your own adventure. Oh, a lot of charters have competitive teams. I worked at a charter last year that had a competitive Lego robotics team, and then the charter that I work for now has, they just won national for their Lego robotics traveling team. Co-ops and homeschool groups. There's, oh, here we go. Some people love working in small groups, and they have their little tribe, they have their little group, and it's very cohesive. And they might do tutor sharing, especially if they're doing it through a PSA. Yes, parent-led co-op. So the parents lead it. Some people will hire teachers to come in also, and they'll pool their money, and they'll either have it at someone's house rotating, or they might even rent out space somewhere at a church or something. So how do we find out about them? For co-ops, people usually put those together, and sometimes it is, you know, it's who you know, but you can co-op with any method, right? Yes, you can co-op with any method because co-ops are going to be private. They're going to be parent-led. So we have teachers come in here that are vendors with charters too. Okay, yeah. So I mentioned tutor sharing. Some co-ops do tutor sharing, and then also with the homeschool groups, sometimes it's not necessarily a co-op where they're doing core. They might be doing enrichment, or it just may be exploring nature or having, you know, depending on the age group, free play. You know, my kids love Friday afternoons because after my daughter gets out of her drop-off enrichment program, we go straight to the park, and she gets to see her friends every Friday afternoon for a few hours. And, you know, sometimes the kids get along, sometimes they don't, but they're working it out. And it's kids of all different ages. You see the older kids kind of helping the younger kids along. You see the younger kids pushing themselves to try to keep up with the older kids, and it's great. So there's also out-of-the-box curriculums, online classes, and independent study programs, which are programs that are just, you know, given by the charter as well. And then, like I said, online classes. They can be online classes facilitated by the charter or as a vendor. For example, OutSchool is a very popular medium to have online classes where there are teachers that give classes live. If you think, you know, tutoring, live tutoring, and it can be a range of subjects. It can be everything from calculus, pre-algebra to leather making. So you just need to know what your student is interested in, and what they would like to learn as well. So again, one size does not fit all. And what works one year may not work the next year. You know, sometimes life experiences change as well. So, and it's all about rolling with the punches. So what about socialization? I get this question all the time. What about socialization? My first inclination is to say, dogs are socialized. I have children. My children have meaningful interactions with others. They're not restricted by age or grade. And then, you know, what people talk about socialization in schools, are they talking about socialization, or are they talking about peer pressure? And then sometimes administrative pressure as well, the pressure from the administrators. So, you know, the world is our classroom. We can make the world our classroom. So, okay. And again, socialization, we have enrichment programs, field trips, co-ops, nature groups, service projects. I love service projects. I like doing them once a month. And it can be anything from picking up trash at the beach with my 4-year-old. He gets like the teeniest, tiniest pieces of plastic along the shoreline, which is great. To, you know, collecting socks, clean, dry socks for the homeless, going to animal shelters. They usually give you a tour, but then you can also volunteer there or bring donations for them, collect donations and take it to them. Going to classes. My daughter loves her art classes. My son loves his Waldorf inspired Spanish immersion classes. And he also likes his not so Waldorfy puppy dog math class because he gets to play math games in it and it's really fun for him. Sports, dance, lessons, mentorship. Mentorship is big, especially when students get to be a little bit older. It's maybe more like, it looks more like apprenticeship, and that's something they can do. And hey, just life, just going through life as well. What about college? Okay. It's funny because usually when people are trying to, especially moms, when they bring their husbands to come talk to me, the first question the husband asks is, well, what about college? I'm looking at Stanford, I'm looking this and that. Okay, so let's talk about college with homeschooling. Okay. Colleges welcome a growing number of homeschool students. Now, this is a recent headline. There are tons of headlines like this, but let's look at some of the statistics. SAT scores of college-bound homeschoolers are higher than the national average. They are more likely to vote and participate in community service than other adults. So they have a stake not only in their education, but also in their community. And, if you're the type of person that has a stake in your community and you're advocating for something, I know a lot of us are, then, that extends to your children as well. So let's see. Most homeschool college graduates, they graduated at a higher rate than their peers. Homeschool students earned more college credits prior to freshman year than other students, and they earned higher grade point averages. Homeschool students have a slightly higher retention rate, slightly higher, but it's still, something to look at. And more and more colleges are looking to homeschoolers, as viable candidates. In fact, a recent report from San Luis Obispo showed that more homeschool students were accepted into San Luis. Oh,
Los raíces están haciendo así, entonces también se van a ver por aquí abajo.
Oh, here, I'm gonna. More homeschool students were accepted into San Luis Obispo than international students, which is pretty unprecedented. So homeschoolers are definitely making a showing in our college system. Okay, so now let's get down to some of the logistics. Wouldn't the student be considered a public charter school student instead of homeschooled? Yes and no. I mean, it just all kind of depends. Some people like going through the charter system until about the end of 8th grade, and then they might file a PSA. And they might do that for a lot of reasons. They might do that because maybe one, they don't necessarily agree with a lot of what is being taught in it required in high schools. Maybe it may be too much or maybe too little. One of my daughter's teacher helpers at one of her enrichment programs, 15 years old, was homeschooled and then went back to Huntington Beach High School for 1 year. And then sophomore year, she decided, you know what? It's a waste of time for me because she learns more efficiently the way she learns by homeschooling. So she's able to do it that way. Can you touch on hybrid programs? Yes. There is no wording that says that hybrid programs will not be allowed under 276 or 714. It's still subject to SB 277, and SB 277, says that no more than, I believe it's 80% of the time in a classroom. So what does that mean? If you belong to a charter, they're going to hold you to probably or no more than 3 days. I do know people, I'm not recommending it one way or another, that may do a little bit more by utilizing more than one enrichment program. So, it's completely customizable. It's completely up to the parent. And
Andy,
yes.
Andy, does that mean that in terms of the hybrid program, that is a charter where they go into a classroom, twice a week? Is that how that works? Or
yes and no. So the hybrid program is usually it can be one of two things. If it's charter, if it's tied to the charter and the charter is hosting it, then the charter, that's what the charter is going to cover. Now, if you have a true ISP, like say Inspire, they don't have any of their own enrichment programs. However, with the educational funds, you can utilize them to pay vendors. And the way the vendor system works is generally with ISPs, services, you know, items like curriculum, consumables, paint, or technology. And so no money changes hand per state of California. So Denise, you had a question? Here, let me unmute you. What's your question, Denise? Okay, so lowers hand. Okay, so with the hybrid programs, usually they are vendor programs. So my daughter goes to a Charlotte Mason art-based enrichment drop-off hybrid program. They don't cover all core. We do core on our own. So my daughter, we pay for a Barton tutor for her to kind of help her, you know, support her with her dyslexia, and that's our choice. But with this program, it's very customized. She does social studies, science, theater, Spanish. Gosh, she also does, well, you know, history, civics, geography. So we do a lot of math, and, you know, we do our beauty loops at home, even though she gets a lot of beauty loops there. My son, so how do you find out which schools, public or private, participate in something like this? So most charters have vendors that serve the enrichment programs. And they're just private vendors. So my son goes to a Waldorf inspired one. It's only 2 days a week. And it's specifically for homeschoolers. I know that there is an enrichment program in Newport Beach, and they have classes up to 5 days a week where students usually go either 2 or 3 days a week. There's one in Fountain Valley as well. And that's usually, you know, you tell your HST when you're with a charter what you're looking for. If you're looking for something more traditional, your HST should know what you're looking for. If you're looking for, oh yes, STEAM programs too in Ranchos. So there's brain builders, there's, you know, I have students that still go to Kumon, and they love Kumon, and that also supplements their homeschool journey as well. And Kumon is a vendor. But it just depends on what your student is into and how your student learns best, your child. And children are going to be different. You know, your oldest is going to probably learn differently from your youngest. At least that's my experience as well. My son, he's in TK, and I got him curriculum from The Good and the Beautiful, and a pre-K program. And he had it in his mind that he was starting homeschool, even though nothing really changed for him because we do sort of delayed academics. He's only 4. I'm not going to push him. However, he finished his Good and the Beautiful pre-K program book in 1 week. And it's because he had it in his mindset that that's what he wanted to do. So he's definitely ego. Okay, so yes, Jamie, where are you? What's your question? I don't know if I see everybody.
Sorry, am I unmuted now?
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, okay, this is my first time using this program, so I don't really know what I'm doing.
That's okay.
Yeah, just quick question before I have to go. So what, for homeschooling with a charter specifically, I know you enroll, but then can you choose your start date, or is the charter the one that tells you when your child begins?
Your start date is going to be the day that you sign your master agreement, and that is how it is with every single charter. Okay. So, you know, you go through the enrollment process, and you know, you give your notice. If say you're leaving now, you go through the process of your other school, kind of, you know, giving your notice there, and then you apply at a charter. They're going to go through the enrollment process, make sure all the paperwork is in order, and then you'll sign a master agreement, and then that'll be your official start date. They may give you resources before that. You'll have access to an HST probably before that. You'll have access possibly to funds before that, depending on the charter.
Gotcha.
So,
Thanks.
yeah. And also, one thing I want to say, if you're worried about not having what you need when you start, you know, say there's a week or two lapse between when your student leaves that school and you sign the master agreement, there are so many ways to homeschool, and there are so many resources online that you can access to. So I also tell families that especially if they're coming from public school, to get into the homeschool mindset, it might be okay to deschool a little bit. What does that mean? Does that mean not do anything? No. That means, take a little bit more time to do more field trips. Wake up, take your journal, and go to the beach and sketch or write what you see. Talk about the sea life. Talk about what you see in the Oaks at Irvine, Regional Park. Find out what your student is into. Dinosaurs. Let's look at dinosaurs. Let's go find field trips about dinosaurs, and kind of bring the curriculum to life through a number of different ways by doing. So one thing I wanted to say also is that you should always look beyond the 9 to 3. I don't know if you guys can see this here, but learning does not have to take place between 9 and 3 p.m. It can take place anytime. I know plenty of families that have dual working families that own businesses, and they homeschool when they can. They make it work. It may be after they get home from work and they kind of do some work. It may be weekend family schooling, but learning is life. Some people really enjoy doing block learning. Maybe they have a flex schedule. So what does that mean? That means, what you would see in college. Mondays, you study math. Get math out of the way. Language arts is Tuesdays. Social studies is Wednesdays. Science is Thursday, and then you have Friday for playing or, going on field trips or whatever it may be. So, yeah, so important. We gauge what the students' optimal learning time is. That's important too. Thank you, Nakomi. Also, oh yes, and if a child is more advanced in his or her grade, can she work ahead? Yes, absolutely. My son is working ahead. He's working beyond kindergarten. My daughter, she is ahead in some subjects and she's behind in some subjects. So the thing with homeschooling is I meet my children individually where they are. And there are going to be years where we are struggling. Yes. Then there are also going to be years where we got it clicking. We're going along. It's easy. And we almost feel guilty because, it's like what's going on. So, I think that's something to look at as well. Also, down here, perfect is the enemy of good. What situation are they coming from? How can you meet their needs? How can you follow their leads? Charlotte Mason, she's one of the pioneers of homeschooling. And she talks about giving children a gentle feast on which to nibble. So exposing them to a lot of different things and to see where their interests lie. And so that you can meet them where they are. My husband always says that each student unfolds uniquely and that he's come a long way. My husband's the guy that is still kind of bitter that he was number 2 in his Catholic all-boys school. But then he recognizes how unique his daughter is and how out of the box she thinks. She's very creative. She has struggles. And instead of making her feel bad about it, we meet her where she is and we try to help. Some of it is also outsourcing when needed or desired. We outsource language arts right now because we're seeing a Barton tutor. And why did we come to that? Because I will admit it hasn't been easy always. I went through 3 different phonics programs with my daughter and it just wasn't clicking. It wasn't until we found Mrs. Williams and a Barton trained tutor that she started really excelling. And let me tell you, it's been 3 weeks and my daughter has made more progress in 3 weeks than I did all of last year. So it's knowing kind of, when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to outsource. And we outsourced that and it's been so good for us. Again, experts love homeschoolers. When you're on field trips and your student shows an uncanny interest in dinosaurs, that paleontologist is going to be on it, and you might as well just get a snack because it's going to be the next 3 or 4 hours of your life, in our experience. Also, support. I always talk about mama schooling, and finding your tribe is very, very important. And even with your tribe, sometimes it can feel lonely. That is just normal. And I think that's just parenting. Parenting is rough, but you want to make sure that you're doing it with someone, one that can challenge you, because iron sharpens iron. So you want to be surrounded by people that have, parenting in California is rough. Yes, I know. So like-minded, and then also people that you can learn from as well, that have different perspectives. And that's the way we approach homeschooling. And where do you find this? You find this from your own group. I mean, I know I recognize a lot of you, and a lot of you are advocates and activists. And part of your advocacy is going to be your own children and the children in your community. And so you're going to form that community, and we're all going to be in that community, and it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing. That's one of the great things about Orange County. Also for groups, people have utilized meetup.com, Facebook groups. They get together with other families that they meet in enrichments and classes and other activities, when they form co-ops and teacher tutor sharing. And oh yes, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Yes, you should. You should definitely sign up with one of those advocacy groups. I know there's Heritage Defense also. So, we can talk a little bit more about that too. But yeah, it doesn't hurt. If you're with a charter, it's a little bit easier because you have those protections. Nobody can say you're not educating, because there are certain safeguards. You have a homeschool teacher that is going to be there to ensure your success, to give you encouragement when you want to quit. And you will feel like you want to quit sometimes. I feel that way sometimes too. But hey, I mean, when it really boils down to it, don't you kind of feel that way about parenting? Sometimes you're just like, I need to get away. I need to walk away for a moment. And that's when you look at the next 6 weeks and say, I'm getting a tutor for 6 weeks. I'm taking a break. And that is fine too. A lot of people also do school term cycling, where yes, we reassess and then regroup. We do too. We do it usually every 6 weeks, definitely every semester and every month, see where we are at. And I think that if you're here because you care, you're here because you want an education for your child and you want to access those resources. So right there, that shows how committed you are to your children. And I know that we all are. So when I say school term cycling, with charters, it gets a little bit stickier because, it goes by a traditional school calendar. But if you're going through a tough time, if you have a loved one dying, or, you get sick, then if you take a week off, double up the next week as well. So are the charters about to be completely full because of the new laws? I don't know. I know, so for next year, I don't think so. So I work for Inspire, and Inspire, I know right now has 69 spots left in Orange County. And they're closing their enrollment, I believe, October 15th. So there are other charters as well that may have room if,
Do you think that hi Andy, Ashley
Hi.
here. I'm getting a cold, so I'm not going to show you my face because
That's okay.
it's special. But do you think that, so I just enrolled my twins in a preschool, nearby, twice a week, because I have MEs for them that will be good until December 31st. So if I get them in right now, then, then I have that choice. My concern is that like you said, the year after, that all of the homeschool charters are going to be totally full. Does it make sense for me to get a spot, or for anyone to get a spot, even though we're not going to utilize it yet?
I don't know that they're going to fill up next year.
Okay. Okay.
I know for this year there is a cutoff, and there are a
Okay.
certain amount of spaces, and I think that's, and don't quote me on this. This is what I think. I think it has something to do with the way it's written into the charter. Because
Okay.
usually when they have limits like that, it's because it's written into the charter. And anytime a charter reauthorizes or becomes authorized, they have to stick to what is written in the terms of whatever their charter,
Says.
perspective is.
Right. Okay.
So one thing to keep in mind also, you cannot be dual enrolled.
Okay. Okay.
That's against the law. So if
Okay.
you are in a public school, you can't. It's called ADA, and it's average daily attendance. You can't collect. That school can't collect ADA along
Right.
with
Right.
this
Right.
school.
Right. Right. Okay.
So
That's helpful. Thank you.
yeah, but I do have some homeschool teachers here, and let me see. That that can answer questions as well. And
Okay.
so my roster's full for this year, but I invited some HSTs to answer some questions, because I want people to have a good fit. And that's one great thing about a charter that you don't get in other schools, especially with ISPs, is that you get to choose your HST. You get to request who you want to work with, because this is really important. This group has parents from outside OC as well. Okay, so I know we're talking a lot about charter homeschooling in California, but just one thing that I'll leave you with, and then we'll talk a little bit more about charters, is that you can homeschool with zero cost. Okay, how do you do that? There are so many resources. We live in the age of information, and like my friend Toni Morrison here says, libraries have so many resources. You can get Hoopla, Libby, and Overdrive with a library card, which gives you access to digital books. It gives you access to free audiobooks and movies that you can check out. Ped Ed is great for hearing experts and hearing different talks. Khan Academy is phenomenal. A lot of high schoolers love Khan Academy because it covers so much, and they keep adding content. MIT Scratch is a great, and it's open source. There's Easy Peasy All-in-One Homeschool. That's completely free, and they have both grade school and high school curriculum, classical curriculum. Hippocampus.com, Discovery K-12. They're great courses. I love the great courses. My husband loves listening to the great courses, because they record actual university classes, and you get to take a university level class and watch it, as if you were auditing that class. So that's, that definitely adds to the education. edX and Open Education Database. A lot of those websites have access to recorded classes from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, the UC system, all the Ivy Leagues. And so, that knowledge is out there for you. Education.com is also really great, although they have a limit on how many worksheets you can download, but I like it sometimes. I mean, we don't use a whole lot of worksheets in our homeschool journey, because we're very hands-on and we like to be out and about. But, honestly, sometimes my 8-year-old will say, "Mom, can't I just do a worksheet?" And she'll ask for a worksheet, and so I will do a worksheet for her. Teacher Pay Teachers is another great site. It's teacher created materials. Amazon Prime, if you have an account, Amazon Prime, I believe, has its own homeschool subscription box where you can get books delivered to your house. You can rent textbooks. You can watch a lot of documentary content. Audible. LibreVox is completely free, and it has a lot of audiobooks, usually classics. I mentioned Hoopla, Libby, and Overdrive with your library card. Book rentals, thrift books. I buy too many books on thrift books, half price books, Abe books. Use homeschoolbooks.com. Scribed, Audible, and also most museums and galleries have free days where you can go either once a month or once a week. For example, Orange County Museum of Art, Fridays, boom, you know, we want to go see some art on Fridays, get in for free. And they love students. And also, don't underestimate the teachers' discounts. If you're a homeschool teacher, take advantage of those. I know that Barnes & Noble has teacher, you know, a teacher program, and homeschoolers are definitely included in that, where you can get 25% off and sometimes more, depending on the time of year. So one thing to also keep in mind is, you know, the intrinsic cost. So when you're in school, how much are you paying for, example, teacher gifts or materials that you need to bring to class, or, you know, the latest, greatest clothes, or, you know, lunches, or this and that. You know, my husband and I, we put together a homeschool budget ourselves. And that's just, you know, what we do. And we also roll it into things like Legoland and things like that, because those can be very enriching as well. And then some questions.